Well, today we consider the words of St. Gregory the Great upon this gospel. And he makes this point. You might recall in Psalm 113, even if you don't recall the exact number, but you might recall that in one of these psalms, which is Psalm 113, the royal psalmist, who's King David, speaks about those carved idols of wood that the pagans worship. And he points out that these idols have no ears, and they do not hear, and they have no actual mouth, and so they speak not. Well, the same may be said, in a spiritual sense, of sinners who, in spite of all exhortations, choose to proceed in their sinful ways. Now we think about this. What is it that you hear and you do not listen to? Well, or on the other hand, you could think about the bad things you listen to that affect the way that you speak. But the good things that you hear that you don't listen to, well, that has an effect on you. Now, Holy Scripture calls these pagan idols deaf and pronounces them to be dumb dogs. Now, the same may be said in a spiritual sense of sinners who, in spite of all exhortations, choose to proceed in their sinful ways. They are called deaf, and they are pronounced to be dumb dogs, for though they enjoy the sense of hearing, they are able to hear, and they are able to speak. But they use these senses wrongly, and so they make their condition worse than if they did not have them at all. Because if one is corporally deaf, they are not to blame for that. And if one cannot speak, actually, by the use of their body, no one is to blame by that, if that is by a natural cause. But it is a very great misfortune, and actually it is criminal, if we have the use of hearing and we do not listen to what is good. And if we have the use of speech, and if we use that to utter blasphemies or calumnies or curses or swear words, or even to curse God, much less to curse another person, or to gossip about them, to say things that aren't true about another person, or even to say things that are true but are not yours to reveal. They're not your truths to be revealed or to be spoken about. Now, we can have a willfully spiritual deafness, and we can have an obstinate refusing to hearken to what is said. I mean, I can think about my time as a teenager, when I'd be in my room and I'd hear my mother or my father come home, and I would know that they were going to come and they were going to ask me to help bring in the groceries, and they were going to ask me to help build a fire in the fireplace in the wintertime. And so I pretended not to hear them. I just didn't hear them. Of course, I heard them. I didn't hear them. I chose that I was not going to hear my parents so that I wouldn't have to do what they asked me to do. And I wasn't being disobedient because I didn't hear them. But I did hear them. And I was willfully choosing to be spiritually deaf. And that is a criminal offense against God. Now, I say that, I'm just admitting that. Maybe I'm the only teenager who chose not to hear what his parents were saying to him. I don't know, but I would guess that it's a common thing. I would guess this is a common thing against teenagers, or the teenagers do. But not only teenagers. It is also adults who do the same thing. We learn when we are young. I don't know how we learn it, but we continue that as adults. We choose to hear what we wish to hear, and we choose to block out what we don't want to hear. Now, that's fine if those things that we don't want to hear are bad things. But if they are good things, then really, according to St. Gregory the Great, that's a criminal offense against God. It's voluntary. We're choosing to do so. So are sinners who obstinately continue in their criminal ways. They have ears, but they will not hear. They are deaf not by misfortune, but by choice. They are often called upon and often spoken to, and what is told them in the name of God, who said, "He that heareth you, heareth me, and he that despiseth you, despiseth me." Nay, God himself speaks often to them, and calls upon them to leave the broad and dangerous road of sin, assuring them that it leads to destruction, and to continue on this dangerous road, to persist in this fatal and broad way. What is it but a proof that we do not and will not hear, and stop our ears against every admonition, and that if we perish, it is our own fault? Now, it may not have been a mortal sin that I chose not to hear my parents who wanted me to bring in the groceries and build the fire, but the habit that I developed by choosing not to hear them when I really heard them, well, the danger is that that will grow into a worse habit, and that a person will not heed the words of God. If we don't heed the words of our parents, if we ignore the fourth commandment to honor our father and our mother, well, then that grows into a vice in our adulthood, that we will not heed the voice of anyone, especially those who have authority over us. Now, we return now to St. Gregory the Great. What has been said of sinners being spiritually and willfully deaf is equally true of the faculty of speaking, which they have lost in the same way. It is a natural consequence of being deaf that one has a difficulty learning how to speak. For not being able to hear what is said, it is not easy to learn how to speak. But in like manner, when sinners have contracted a spiritual deafness and will not hear what is said to them about their duties, there is no wonder that they become likewise spiritually dumb, as to use the right use of speech. A proof of spiritual dumbness is the too frequent omission of prayer, of devotion, and of other religious duties. In this respect, many are dumb, for though they know how to speak and do so very often and with great eloquence about the things of this world, yet in regard to God and his honor and his service, they know not how. That is, they will not open their mouths. Just think of all those who were raised as Christians, not just Catholics, but those who were raised as Christians, who today will not give one word of praise to God, who defy God by everything they speak, by everything they do, almost out of resentment. Well, I don't know where that comes from. Well, maybe I do. It is my whole generation turned away from God. I think the generation before me was raised with discipline, raised in the faith. My generation was raised with very little discipline, very little guidance. And then the next generation after mine received even less. And so we have now a few generations where they haven't even been baptized, or they do not even know what God is. Sometimes I'll see children or teenagers that I might meet out and about, and they'll say, "Well, what are you?" And I'll say, "Well, I'm a Catholic priest." "Well, what is that?" "Well, I serve God. I stand in the place of Jesus Christ." "Well, who's that? What is God? What is God?" They do not even know. They don't have a concept even of what God is. And that is where things have led. So that's all a great mystery. The question is whether people are even hearing what they need to hear. Is there any room in our world to even hear what there is to hear, much less to listen? So now we have to think about how we, the faithful, are speaking. Do we speak in ways that edify others? Do we speak in ways that bless others? Do we speak in ways that communicate the goodness and the love and the truth of God and the gospel? That's not to say that you need to be quoting the scriptures every day to those that you speak to. That might turn them away. But you can begin by speaking words of goodness and truth and beauty, of blessing, being a sign of contradiction, a sign of wholesomeness, and of peace and calm in your soul. And that's something people are desperately looking for. People are desperately looking to be at peace in their souls. There's so much anxiety in the world today. And what do we hear from the news? We hear things that cause anxiety and stress and fear. What's coming? What's the next thing that's coming? What do we hear in popular music? Blasphemies, vices, lust, all sorts of longing that cannot be satisfied. Even in the less offensive popular music, we often hear about a longing that cannot be satisfied, a love that cannot be, requited, an unrequited love. And there's nobody who will satisfy that longing in your heart. Well, there is someone who will satisfy that longing in your heart. It's God. But do we hear that message? Popular music, we don't hear that message. Certainly in popular media, we don't get that message. So if there's no other place that people are going to hear goodness and truth and beauty and fulfillment and peace and joy, if there's no other source other than you, maybe you are the only source from whom they will hear that. Well, you have to have a plan. Do not be as that idol that has eyes but cannot see, ears that do not hear, a mouth that does not speak. We need to be the voice of Christ in the world. We need to be the hands of Christ that do good things. We need to listen with the ears of Christ. We need to walk with the feet of Christ. We need to be that presence of Christ in the world, because if you do not do that, you may be the only person in many people's lives who can provide that, who can be that presence for them. Well, we entrust ourselves to the Lord then, to His grace, that we will have the courage to do so, that our ears will be open to hear the truth and to speak words of goodness. We entrust that to God. And if you stay close to God, if you have a life of prayer, stay close to the sacraments, and don't wander too far away in your daily life, you will be that presence of God in other people's lives, even if you don't realize it. And really, that needs to be our goal. And so I bless you, and I give you all my encouragement and my love to you, that you may then pass that on to those whom you encounter today and every day this week. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.